Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We're happy to be back. We had a week off last week because I was unavailable. I was spending time with grandchildren and recording just in that case anyway, did not work. So we're happy to be back with you. It's Olivia and I this week. Carolyn's out of town this week. Life gets busy for us, but here we are back again in the book of Ruth. And this week, we're going to be dealing with chapter 3 of the book of Ruth. And I think you'll like this chapter. It's kind of, I maybe call it or nickname it the budding romance chapter here. It's just kind of a lovely chapter to see this relationship between Ruth and Boaz begin. And I think you'll be kind of surprised at how this plays out and how it all begins. So without further ado, we're going to read the whole chapter and then do some discussing. So I will read half, and Olivia, I'll let you read the other half. So I'm going to go 1 through, let's see, I'll probably go 1 through 9, and then Olivia, I'll let you go 10 through the rest, okay?
I was literally about to say 9.
Oh, good. Great minds think alike, right? All right. Ruth chapter 3. One day, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not try to find a home for you where you will be well provided for? Is not Boaz, with whose servant girls you have been, a kinsman of ours? Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash and perfume yourself and put on your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do." "I will do whatever you say," Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man, and he turned and discovered a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am your servant Ruth," she said. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer." Olivia, you can pick up there, verse 10.
"The Lord bless you, my daughter," he replied. "This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor, and now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All my fellow townsmen know that you are a woman of noble character. Although it is true that I am near of kin, there is a kinsman redeemer nearer than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem, good, let him redeem. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, "Don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor." He also said, "Bring me the shawl you are wearing and hold it out." When she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then he went back to town. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "How did it go, my daughter?" Then she told her everything Boaz had done for her and added, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" Then Naomi said, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today."
Okay, a short chapter, and it seems fairly simple, right? But there's kind of a lot of little hidden nuances and meanings that are going on. So let's just kind of dig in a little bit here. At the very beginning in verse 1, Naomi comes to Ruth. Now remember, this is after Ruth has been out gleaning in the field, and Boaz sees her and kind of is showing favoritism towards her. And Naomi is aware of that. Ruth has reported that to her. Say Naomi then comes to Ruth, and essentially it's kind of cute because Naomi turns into a matchmaker and wants to get a home or find a home for Ruth, which is kind of a cool transition to be seeing here with Naomi. Remember, Naomi, when she came back, was feeling very sad and bitter. In fact, she wanted her name changed to what means bitter. She had suffered this great loss and was in deep mourning. And it's almost like this incident with Boaz and him showing favoritism towards Ruth now has kind of turned Naomi's mood around. And so now she's, instead of being like focused on herself and her grief, she's now turning her thoughts outward and thinking of Ruth and wants to have some security for Ruth. I think she recognizes how much Ruth has given up for her and how devoted Ruth has been. And so she gives Ruth kind of this plan that she has hatched, that Boaz has been kind to her. He's noticed her. And, oh, by the way, he happens to be a relative who would be a kinsman redeemer. So Ruth is agreeing to this. She tells her to dress nicely and then wait until he is alone and in a good mood. So this is the time of threshing. Harvest is completed, but now they're threshing, which is they're separating the grain from the chaff, essentially. And that's hard work. And so they're going to be working at it for a while. So Naomi kind of gives her some smart advice, don't go in the midst of threshing. Wait until he's in a good mood. Wait until he's done eating and drinking, and then pay attention to where he lays down for the night, and then go over there and lie at his feet. Remember I said that he is a kinsman redeemer, and we talked a little bit about this last time. This kinsman redeemer, it's a member of the family. Because Naomi doesn't have any children, are there any remaining children or sons that Ruth could be married to, then they start going to the next relatives and male relatives, and they can marry Ruth then. And if they would produce offspring with Ruth, then they would have the property then that Ruth's son would be eligible to inherit. Does that make sense?
That
Okay.
strangely does, but I have 3 other questions.
Okay, go ahead. What are your questions?
Number 1, she says for people to call her Mara, and yet the rest of the reading, she's referred to as Naomi. Why? It's just weird because I'm blanking on his name. He was blinded by God.
Samson.
No.
No.
He was on he had beat a donkey or whatever.
That's
in the middle
Samson.
of a road, and then his eyes were covered with sand or scales.
Oh, Paul.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, he wasn't beaten
I
by
was
a
like,
donkey.
oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, or he was beating a donkey. Something happened. It's just curious that they change his name after he says, "My name is now Paul." But for
Yeah.
her, it's like, okay, call me Mara because I'm bitter. But then they still refer to her as Naomi.
Right, because that name changes her choice, and she makes it her choice to kind of reflect like her mood. Remember, Naomi means what was it?
Bitter.
No, Mara means bitter. Naomi means sweet, pleasant. Yeah. So when Naomi says that, call me Mara, she's doing that to reflect her mood. all the other name changes that we see in the Bible where the name change sticks, that's God's initiative. God changes a person's name. You remember when he changes Jacob's name to Israel, Abram to Abraham. We're not, Jesus renames Simon to Peter. We don't know why Saul becomes Paul. We're not told of the name change. It's just all of a sudden, they start calling him Paul instead of Saul. But those things are God's initiative, but this is not God's initiative. This is Naomi's kind of bitterness, her own grief at the loss of her husband and her sons. That is, she's wanting people to call her Mara, but that doesn't stick. Because that's not a name change that God gives her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, she just didn't have her mood change plushie.
Right. All right. What's your next question?
Is the winnowing, is that another term for the separation? Because they use those interchangeably, and I was like, are they the same thing or are they different?
Yeah, same thing.
And then this is just a curiosity, like, why would he sleep there if they're working?
Yeah, so the threshing floor is kind of like a piece of bare ground, probably was elevated just so that the wind would catch the like chaff and blow it away as because to thresh the grain, they don't have a threshing machine, so they're beating it on the ground and the grain falls off. And so then there's chaff that then would be blown away. So it's hard work. But then also, first, two reasons that he's sleeping there. First of all, somebody needs to stay there just to kind of keep an eye on the harvest and the grain that's been harvested, because they're working at this all day. And they finally call it quits. And then the other thing is, and this kind of figures then into later in the story and what's going on here and why Naomi tells her to wait until after they're done with all of this, because then once they get all that done, it's like the harvest is completed and they're having a celebration of the harvest. All the hard work is done. So they eat a big meal and are probably drinking. And so he's staying there also because they've been partying essentially all night.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if there's like a tradition or something, or if it's just because you didn't want to walk all the way back to your tent or whatever you were in.
Yeah, probably.
That makes sense.
Yeah, probably a lot of that stuff. And then we need to talk about this thing on what does it mean, the symbolism for what does it mean to lie at his feet. And that's a really interesting kind of a tradition or a symbolic thing to do. There are some who say that this word or this in the Hebrew, if you look at it, she tells him to uncover his legs and lay at his feet. And there are some that suggest that this is kind of a sexual overture. That's really not the case. It's not what's going on here. Yeah, I know.
I'm sorry, legs. Oh my gosh, can't control myself. This hairy man legs.
In the upper part of the legs, if you catch my drift.
Oh, okay.
All right. So, but that's not what's going on here. So what's going on here is that this is an indication, kind of a physical indication here of taking a subservient role. So she's indicating a role, a willingness to take a role of humility, not only as a servant, because this is where typically servants would lay. So somebody would be laying, at their feet. And a lot of times the servant would lay like crossways at their foot. And then a lot of times then the servants could take like the hem of their blanket and cover up with that. But the servants were there kind of ready and waiting to serve their master if their master were to wake up in the middle of the night and need anything. So it's that, but it
Okay.
also, it has kind of a double meaning here. So it's this role of servanthood and humility, but it also kind of signifies, then Ruth is kind of signifying that she's willing to take on this subservient role of being a wife to him. So essentially what we see happening here, and this is the part of the story I said that's kind of unexpected and that I really kind of love, is Ruth is essentially proposing to Boaz. She's popping the question. She's saying, look, I would like to be your wife. And she does that by taking this subservient role and laying at his feet. There's not any kind of a sexual overtone or anything to this, but it is an honorable way that she's indicating to him that she would like to be his wife. It's also, you see kind of an element of trust here, that Ruth is going to trust that Boaz will act in an honorable and responsible way. Remember, she is a widow. She's a single woman. She's a foreigner. And there's a risk here that Boaz could easily kind of reverse things and take advantage of her. And he probably would not be condemned for doing that because he'd say, look, she came on to me. So Ruth is exhibiting an amount of trust here in that Boaz is going to act with integrity and that he is not going to do that. He's not going to take advantage of her, that she's going to be able to approach him with this idea, I want to become your wife. You are a kinsman redeemer, and it's you that I choose to be the one to redeem me. She's well aware of, because probably Naomi has told her, of kind of what the rules are here and what the law is. But also she does it under the cover of darkness so that Boaz has the opportunity to reject her without the whole town knowing about it. So it kind of preserves her honor and her reputation and also gives him a way out to act, without kind of bashing her in the process. But she really does trust that he is going to act in an honorable way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting. My commentary says that she's doing an act of total submission.
Yep.
But that I don't know if that's your interpretation. You're calling that she's proposing to him, because my commentary doesn't mention it. But it does reference that she is coming to claim her right from him, but that she does, like, they mentioned the I respect you, I trust you, and I put my fate in your hands.
Yeah. So coming to claim her right from him is coming to claim the option that he could be the kinsman redeemer, that he would be the family member who could marry her and produce a child. Now, do you remember, you didn't join me on the Genesis study. So in the, when we talked about Tamar, who is an ancestor here, and I think we talked about this last time, the incident with Tamar and Judah, that Judah's sons, Tamar's first husband died without producing any offspring. And so the second son then had to take her as a wife and produce a child, an heir for his brother.
I wasn't there for the beginning of the Genesis Bible study, but I was for the end.
Okay. All right.
So that I do remember, because then
Okay.
she pretended to be a prostitute, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
And so this is the way things are. And so Naomi has educated Ruth on this and has told her about this. And so Ruth is trusting or coming to Boaz, knowing that there is more than one. He's not the only one. He's not the only option out there. But essentially what she's saying to Boaz is, I want you to be the one to redeem me. So it's not really a proposal per se, but it is kind of Ruth's way of saying, I choose you instead of the other guys, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
Something that I just caught was that they mention a specific time when she approached him. And I don't know if it's because the translation, but my commentary says that she didn't approach him until midnight.
Yeah, she waits until it's dark. And that's why I said she waits until the cover of darkness so that Boaz, that's for two reasons. Number one is that so nobody will recognize her, and so that she's not like coming up to him like with everybody around and like throwing herself at him. But also it gives him the option to kind of have an out without it happening in front of everybody else. So Boaz doesn't come off looking like kind of a chump in front of everybody.
Yeah, it's just how are they able? It's just a very specific time, and how they figured it out is what I'm curious about. Or if it's like the number 3 in the Bible, if the number 12 is something, and
Well, and yeah, and my translation just says, when it was dark.
I mean, mine says in the middle of the night, but then my commentary says that it happened at midnight.
Yeah, no, I think just, in the middle of the night is probably more accurate. We don't know for sure what time it is.
Okay.
The other thing that I want to kind of point out here is that when he wakes up and he says, "Who are you?" And this is in verse 9, she says, "I am your servant Ruth." So she identifies herself. And then she says, "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer." Now, wait a minute. That's not the place where I want it. There's a place where, yeah, maybe it is that place. She kind of echoes his words that he says to her in chapter 2, verse 12, when he kind of notices that she has been taking such good care of her mother-in-law. And he says to her, "May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." So she's echoing this kind of theme of protection, spreading the wings, spread your garment over me. So essentially implying the kind of wings. So what she's saying is, she's kind of building on what he said, your God is my God. But now she wants it to be even more. I want your protection as a husband, as well as the protection of the Lord. So it's kind of a symbolic speaking of marriage. Spread your garment over me, spread your wing over me, and protect me, shelter me under your wing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it just seems like verse 10 would be more inclined for that.
Well, yeah. Well, except the thing that we have to remember is Ruth is repeating, kind of continuing the theme that Boaz started in chapter 2. So when Boaz says, "May the Lord cover you with his wings, your refuge, because you've chosen this," what she's saying essentially is kind of an answer to him. Yeah, I've chosen the wings, the protection, the shelter of the Lord. Now I want your wing, your protection, your shelter as my husband, as my kinsman redeemer.
Oh, okay. Because in chapter 2, verse 13, we'll probably go more with verse 10 in
Right.
chapter 3, because she says that she hopes to continue to find favor in your eyes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I thought she was talking to Boaz about that, but
She was in,
okay.
yeah. And now then in chapter 3, you're right, in verse 10 then is kind of Boaz's response to her. And it's kind of interesting. Boaz responds, the Lord bless you. Your kindness or this kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier, meaning taking care of your mother-in-law.
Okay.
Yeah. But then he goes even further. He says, you have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. So it's kind of an indication here that there was been somebody who was younger, and maybe either
Well,
ugly
I'm
or
sure
not
all the
ugly.
younger men who are eligible were looking at her just because she's probably a beautiful young woman.
Right, right. And I think Boaz recognizes that there's an age difference here between the two of them. He is older than her, probably by a significant amount. But so what he's saying is, look, you could have probably chosen somebody closer to your own age. Uh,
Like,
he,
would you say like in his 50s?
yeah, maybe I would, it's kind
Okay.
of hard to tell, but I would guess there's probably a 15-year, 20-year
Okay.
difference possibly
Okay.
between the two of them. But essentially what we're seeing here is that she could have chosen somebody younger. She could have gone after somebody younger, but she didn't. She chose him. She chose to indicate that she was willing to become his wife. And so,
Well, he was probably, he was super kind. Like,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what you look for. I'm sure he was good looking too. Like, but
Honestly, I think that, yeah, the
it
thing
sounds
that
like
she
though that she was
probably,
looking more towards the emotions and the feelings versus the looks.
right. She's seeing that he is a person who is kind and who is caring. He noticed what she was doing for her mother-in-law and the gleaning in the field. She also noticed that he took special care to make sure that she was taken care of, that she wasn't going to be harmed, that she would get enough food, because he knew that she was not only collecting food for herself, but for Naomi. And so he sees what she's doing. And then if we move down then into verse 14, now remember, if we kind of go back to the beginning where when Naomi wants Ruth to leave and go back, and remember Ruth says, don't ask me to leave you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. You see this progression now happening to this promise that Ruth made. Where you go, I will go. So she went with Naomi. Where you lodge, I will lodge. So she's living now in Bethlehem. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. This is bringing that all to completion. So she's taking the shelter of Yahweh, of God, but she's also now becoming one of those people by agreeing to become the wife of Boaz and willing to submit herself to this honoring of the kinsman redeemer, that he could marry Ruth and produce a child with her. So you see that kind of happen then in verse 14, because she stays there until morning, which is what he tells her to do. And he does that, I think, for a couple of reasons, because he knows that if she were to leave in the middle of the night and encounter anybody on the way home in the darkness, chances are she might have been harmed or like raped or something. So he does that as a protective thing. But then he also says, wants to make sure that she gets up and leaves before anybody can recognize that she's been there, because he doesn't want there to be any question of impropriety here, that she came and spent the night.
Because she could be killed for that, right?
Yeah. Or deemed a prostitute or a loose woman or something like that. Yeah.
I like how he takes it a step further and he's like, here, take some more barley.
And I'm glad you brought that up.
Because he's
Yeah,
thinking
so
about Naomi, like,
exactly. And the other thing that we're seeing here now is when he says to take more barley and he gives her 6 measures, which is probably a good amount to take home. We now are seeing the progression in this story to go a transition here from emptiness to fulfillment. Remember, Naomi came back to this town completely empty. She had no husband, no sons. The only thing she had was this faithful daughter-in-law, and they had no food. They were poor, nobody to take care of them. And now what's happened is we've seen this story kind of blooming here, is that now Boaz is fulfilling what God's trying to do, and to take Naomi and Ruth from a place of emptiness and starvation and not having enough to a place of fulfillment and love and care and nurture. And we'll see that continue then to blossom until the end of the story, when we see how this all plays out.
I'm gonna
So
see
when he
how much
says,
6 measures.
don't go back empty-handed, what he's
Yeah.
saying is Naomi doesn't need to be empty anymore. So when Ruth brings back all of this barley then to Naomi, that is a kind of a visible sign to Naomi that Boaz is going to make sure that Naomi's joy is restored and that she will be taken care of. That's why Naomi reacts the way she does when Ruth comes back. When Ruth comes back, we see this in verse 15. Naomi says, how did it go? And Ruth tells her everything that Boaz had done. And then she shows her all the grain, 6 measures of barley. And she tells him the word, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. And that is an indication to Naomi then that Boaz is essentially saying, don't worry, I've got this. I will take care of this. And that's why Naomi says, this man will not rest until the matter is settled today. Naomi knows that Boaz has promised to do what he can to make sure they are cared for.
Yeah. I Googled how much 6 measures is, and this one person in Google search actually was talking about how it's hard to exactly know how much because there's different measurements,
Right.
but it said that she carried clothes between 63 to 330 pounds.
Probably not 330 though.
No, but that they say that because they're assuming they're like using US measurements. That's the British measurements for if
Yeah,
you do all that, but it was probably closer to 63 pounds.
yeah. And so
But
she had it in her shawl, and she probably either carried it then on her shoulder or on her head.
because they're like, well, then we have to assume that because six what did he say? 6 measures could be 6 epas or whatever,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
but they said this person was like, well, it really depends just because there weren't machines to exactly weigh out the number of pounds
right.
because they did it all themselves. So I was like, oh my goodness.
It was a lot of grain. Let's
A
put
lot
it
of
that way.
grain.
Yeah.
Like, how do they
Would have been
go
enough
through
to
that
keep
much?
them.
Like,
Well, you think about it, that's, they use that for a lot of things, she would probably make like maybe barley soup. She would have ground the barley into flour to make bread. Yeah, so yeah, they would probably use quite a bit, but not like in one day. But essentially
but that
what Boaz is saying here is you're going to be taken care of. Don't worry about it. I've got you for a while here. Because we don't know how long it's going to take for him to get this straightened out. And we'll find that out next week when we look at chapter 4. We'll kind of see how this all plays out.
I know, I'm kind of like, oh, I know how this ends, but like,
Yeah.
it is interesting to look at this from a different perspective because I mean, when we were younger, we had gone through this, of course, with you, and it's it just made me think, which is totally off topic, but when people refer to relationships of like, they use that Bible verse, it's like, well, the wives be obedient to your husbands, blah blah blah. I think it's nice that like this kind of like this is a relationship you should go for. You should look at each other's kindness, their actions, their thoughts, and how they behave, and not just their looks. Like looks are a part of it, but if I'm if I'm looking at how a relationship should be by God, I would think that this would be what I would reference, because I think that's more what things are these days. Because I encounter guys now who, when like you ask about their first impression of their now wives, they're like, oh, it was something she did, like it's or like she sang or whatever. It's just really interesting.
Well, and clearly that's what attracts both, Ruth to Boaz and Boaz to Ruth is their character. They are clearly attracted to each other by their character and their integrity. They both see something valuable in one another. And so that's ultimately kind of what brings them together in this love story. And it really is a beautiful love story that we see. And chapter 3 is lovely because we see this love story now just really kind of come solid, where they finally, it's the point in the movie where the two declare their love for one another.
Yeah, and it's sad that society, like, that's not. I'm sure there are guys who don't think that women look at their character. I do, personal
Yeah.
preference. But it's then at the same time, sometimes I'm like, do they look at my character, how I'm acting, how I treat people? And I would like to
Yeah.
think so. And I think this embodies that. And despite what society has put now out
Right.
there, of like, it's just more about like, it's not about personality and character integrity at all, which is kind of sad.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's close our time together in prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for character and integrity, and for the blessing of being able to read such a beautiful account of two people who are drawn together by their admiration and respect for one another. Lord, we pray your blessing on our lives this week. Help us also to act with character and integrity, and to show other people who we are and whose we are by the things that we do and the kindness that we show. Help us to be safe and productive, and to share opportunities, show us opportunities each day to share your love with others. We ask this in the precious name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, thanks for joining us, everybody. It was good to be back with you again this week, and we will look forward to finishing up the book of Ruth next week. Have a great week.
I was going to say, do we have an idea of what we're doing after Ruth?
I am actually, I know this is against my better judgment. I'm vacillating back and forth between two things. I am debating whether to do the book of Revelation. Trying to decide, I'm trying to decide whether I want to tackle that or not, or if I want to look at one of the Gospels. I know what your preference is.
I love Revelation. That's just
Yeah.
because I look at, I'm always hearing about the Gospels.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and it's just, Revelation is a huge project, it's like 22 chapters. And
that's true. That's
yeah.
true.
So that's the only thing that's kind of holding me back, because we are heading into the time of holidays and things like that. So I don't know, I'm going to chew on it. So if anybody out there has any ideas, requests, suggestions, or something like that, I'm always open to possibilities here. So anyway, have a great week, and we will see you again next week. Thanks for joining us.